So we started this discussion of Parashat Vayetze. Let's talk a little bit about the role of Rashi as a commentator and as how we see it. It is important to speak about that because a lot of people bring up this point. They say that Rashi is Peshat. Rashi is when Peshat with the word Peshat they understand that it means the literal or the simplest meaning of the text. But that's not what Rashi had in mind. First of all, in the time of the Mishnah and the Talmud, the way they use the term pshat came from the word pashat in Hebrew, which means to open a scroll. So, to open a scroll, when you open it, you see the full picture. So the idea was that peshat is something that works in context, unlike derash, which is taking when not with halacha, but with non-halacha material, you pluck the word out of its original context, and you're not committed to the full picture. So you could have a full midrashic interpretation, but as long as it's consistent with the whole text, that will be called peshat, because you have covered the whole unit, and it's applicable. So that was in the time of the Mishnah and the Talmud. By the time of Rashi, it already changed a little bit, and they look at Pshat as a more direct explanation. And the Rashi uses a lot of midrashim in his commentary. Yes, it's. I actually once made an estimate, and then I checked it. My estimate was that in Rashi's commentary on Bereshit, 85% is midrash. That was my assessment, and then what I did was I copied all, in order to check whether it's true or not. I copied all of the text of Rashi, and started highlighting, copying and pasting into 3 different columns. So one column was midrash, the other column was technical explanations that I would not call commentary, like names of people or grammatical commentary, etc., etc. That was the second category, and the third category was original commentary by Rashi. And I was correct. It was 85% of Rashi's commentary is midrash. Another about 5% is technical matters, a lot of grammar and some geography, and 10% is Rashi's original commentary. And still, if you read Rashi in the original language, in the Hebrew, you realize that Rashi's commentary is brilliant, because what he manages to do is to weave all these different commentaries into something which is read in a very, very fluid manner, very, very direct. You could hear Rashi's voice. You could hear how he thinks about his community and how to not only make the text accessible to them, but also to answer some theological questions that they had in terms of Christianity versus Judaism, exile, diaspora, the Crusades, all this. But Rashi himself said, if I had time, I would write a new commentary every day. I think that if Rashi would have come back to life today and would see how people study his commentary and treat every word as if it was given Torah to Moshe Sinai, he would become very, very upset. That's not what he intended. And I actually think that Rashi wrote his commentary in something which would be tantamount to one sitting. Not that he sat and wrote it all in one night, but probably in a burst of creativity, he wrote it in maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, but not over years. Because, and I'm saying that because it has this feeling of something which is very organic, not something that was polished again and again and again. And in many cases, Rashi quotes the Midrash not in its original place. In many other cases, it's the same Midrash, but not where it was written. In other cases, he quotes a different Midrash than the original that was written on the text, and he sometimes brings later Midrashim that was written in his age by Rabbi Shimon Adarshan and Rabbi Moshe Adarshan, and that shows that he studied those texts constantly, and already had a picture of what of how he understands them. So when he wrote it, not necessarily he opened the book to see what the original midrash was, but he just from his memory he crafted the midrash and fitted it into the into the text. And then another thing that is important to remember with Rashi's commentary, and that's something that one of the great scholars of Rashi in our generation, Professor Elazar Twito, pointed out, is that in some places Rashi would say, there are many midrashic interpretation, but I don't want to use them. He says that when the midrashic interpretation can support the Christian interpretation, so he's trying to keep away from it. Yeah, and I did the research and saw that Rashi mentions that statement. There are many midrashim, and I only want to use the pshat in about 15 places in his commentary to Bereshit, which means when he tells you in these 15 places, I only want to use the pshat and not the midrash, it means that anywhere else he does use the midrash. So Rashi is very heavy on the midrashim. He uses them a lot, and we should really look at different commentaries. Yes. I believe that the best commentator of the Chumash is yourself. You go and you read the Chumash thoroughly. You have to know Tanakh thoroughly. Then, if you don't read the Hebrew, you compare different translations. You ask yourself, why is there a deviation between this translation and another that shows that this is a problem in the original text? And you start digging into it. Then you open the commentaries. The commentaries come after your first journey and the analysis of the text. So, and that is why I'm working now on a new commentary and a new translation of the Torah. I have accomplished. Yeah, I'm doing it now. I'm finished Parashat Bereshit, and I hope to make it into a book that will cover the whole Chumash, but it will take a while. So
I began reading the literature you sent me that I asked.
Yeah.
It blew my mind.
We spoke a little bit about Rashi. We could look at the parasha. We are in chapter 28, Parashat Vayetze. Yaakov leaves Beersheva, goes to Haran. He sleeps. It says Vayifga b'makom. He came to this place and he slept there. The commentators following the midrashes that the makom was the temple. This is consistent with the methodology of the midrash to try to identify everything, to not leave any stone unturned. That was a practice that the rabbis in the time when the midrash started to flourish in the turn of the first millennium and the first and second centuries, the rabbis tried to identify places, people. Whenever it says, whenever the Torah refers to an anonymous person, like the refugee, the man, the messenger, the rabbis give that person a name. Whenever a place is mentioned, they try to identify that place to create a connection, because they wanted to give a greater depth to the stories of the Torah, and part of it is because they were competing with the Greek storytellers through the Greek theater, through the tragedies, the comedies that were very, very detailed. And in contrast, the stories of the Torah are very succinct. They're very laconic. They don't give us much detail. And people came and they asked, okay, why don't we know more about this? Yes, Shayna, you have a question?
Yeah, just quickly on that term by Yama Makom.
Yes.
Is that a normal usage for staying there?
No. Okay. So Vayifgar, in modern Hebrew, Lifgoar has only one meaning, and that is to hurt, to cause harm. But actually, in Tanakh, it never means to harm. It means either to meet someone. Or to pray. It says Al tifga ba'adi. So, but it has the sense of the meeting of two things. It is related to the word pagash, which is to meet. So vayifga is really to meet, to get to a place. But later on, it got the meaning of lifgoa, to meet in a violent way. But this is not the biblical meaning. So he gets to the place and he sleeps there, and he takes of the stones and he puts around his head, and he goes to sleep. Later on, the Torah will talk in verse 18 about the stone that he put under his head, And here's the famous midrash. It says many stones, then one stone. It means that all the stones became one. Where the pshat is obvious. He took many stones and he put around him, and he put his head on only one stone. You can't rest your head on one more than one. So he took that particular stone and made it into a monument and poured oil on it. So he has this dream with the letter. He's the first one that has a dream. Previously, God talks to Avimelech b'halom alayla, but that's more of a prophecy. But here is a visual. It's a visual dream with no interpretation. So the interpretation is given to us. We see a letter and the angels going up and down. What is the meaning of the dream? We don't know. It's not in the Torah, but God stands there and says, I am Hashem, the God of your father, Avraham, Yitzhak, I will give you the land, you will inherit the land. It's basically the Birkat Avraham. It's the bracha of Avraham. So we can understand that as a prophecy, and also as the inner struggle in Yaakov's soul. He always asks himself whether what he did with Esav was correct or not. And the flip side, the other part of that dream would be the struggle that we'll have with the man when he comes back from Haran and he crosses the Yabok, and the man struggles with him all night. That is his inner struggle, asking himself whether he did right in taking the Bechorah from Esav or not. So the letter going from earth to heaven can have different meanings. Could be the journey that we have in life, and the aspiration, which is to do something which is greater than ourselves, with some divine direction. Could also the malachim, the messengers of God, which go up and down, could symbolize the changing situations in one's life. You're up or down. In any case, it's a very powerful image. Like if you say Jacob's ladder, everybody knows it in any culture. Almost this has become a globally recognized image of the letter of Yaakov. But it really is the first dream that is mentioned in the Torah. In Yaakov, I think it fits to see that as Yaakov is being shaken. This whole situation, whatever happened to him, really shook him up, because he was leading a quiet, simple life, and with his mother's intervention, he now get into this situation that he asks himself, where am I going from here? So he wants to feel that he's going upwards, going towards a better place, and Hashem confers that for him. What is really surprising is that Yaakov says that when Yaakov wakes up, Vayomer achen yesh Adonai b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati. He says, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. So that casts certain doubt on Yaakov's understanding of the presence of God. And he says, "Ve'anuchi lo yadati," and then what further complicates that is that he immediately says, "Manora makom hazeh en zeh kim bet Elohim ve'zeh sha'ar hashamayim." This must be the house of Elohim, and that is the gate of heaven. So, how do we understand that Yaakov says, "I didn't know that Hashem exists in this place"? It could be that, despite the knowledge and the understanding of monotheism, and that God is the creator of the world and is accessible wherever you are, Yaakov was still thinking in terms of sacred places. There are certain places that are more conducive for communicating with God, and it really raises a question of how much communication was between him and Yitzhak, between Yitzhak and Avraham. Maybe that understanding that you could turn to God wherever you are was not communicated correctly to Yaakov, and he felt that you could only approach God from certain places. So, and because even after his recognition that Hashem is there, he says, "En zakim bet Elohim v'zeh sha'ar hashamayim." That must be a unique place. The switch between Hashem and Elohim could also, I think, show the confusion in Yaakov's soul, because as were mentioned in the discussion of Bereshit and also in the written material, the name of Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, that is, we read as Adonai, is considered Midat HaRachamim. So, mainly in the Kabbalistic writings in medieval times, but it has roots in rabbinic literature, and it makes sense because Shem Havaya is a combination of the three tenses of the word to be, Haya, Hoveh, V'yeh. So it's more a verb than a noun. It's not a name as much as it is a verb. It's as if we say the to be, was, will be, spoke to Yaakov. So that name of the constant fluid Havaya or existence of God reflects the Rahamim because it's not rigid. It's rather something that changes with one's situation in life. But Elohim is also a synonym for judges. So Elohim represent rigor and rigorous justice. So for Yaakov to speak at once of the presence of Havaya and the presence of Elohim is to show the confusion in his soul, in his mind, asking, what I did, was it the right thing in terms of justice to take the baracha from my brother? What I did, was it because I felt compassion for my mother because that's what she wanted, or I wanted to continue my father's way? So he's struggling between Hashem and Elohim. He makes this matzeva, this monument, calls the place Bet-El, and then the neder that he says is as follows. Also very perplexing. It says, if Elohim will be with me and will guard me on the way in which I walk, and will give me bread to eat and garments to wear, and I will return to the house of my father, Hashem will be my Elohim. So what happens here? We could say that is a continuation of this debate within Yaakov's soul. The ideal situation for a person is to have Elohim as the guiding line. Why? Because if Elohim is Midat Adin, is the rigorous justice, it could only function in a place or with a person who makes no errors. That is why the first world of Bereshit is created under the name of Elohim, and the second world is created under Hashem Elohim, the combination of mercy and justice. Because only a perfect world could be run with Midat Adin. In an imperfect world where there's sin, when there's a deception, the name of Elohim will destroy everything. So when Yaakov says V'haya Hashem li Elohim, he says, I want to elevate myself from a situation, from a status where I need to communicate with Shem Havaya, which is mercy, because I'm imperfect. I want to be able to be guided or to communicate with Elohim. So Yaakov continues his journey. He goes to Haran, and we know the story. This is in chapter. Wait, I skipped the chapter. It's still in chapter 29. Yaakov gets to Haran, and he sees the flocks around the well. I mentioned last time that the fact that Yaakov was able to move the stone in one fell swoop, he just removes it, shows that he was a very strong man, not the way we usually imagine Yaakov, as a nebech, as this weakling. He was a strong man. He could have defended himself against Esav. Interesting dialogue between Yaakov and the shepherds. Yaakov tries to strike a conversation. He says, "My brothers, where are you from?" They say, "Haran." "Do you know Lavan ben Nahor?" "We know." "Shalom lo, is he okay?" They say, "Shalom." Like they're trying to avoid him. They don't want to try to talk to him. He's a foreigner. But then Rachel comes. He sees her. He kisses her. This is something also that some commentators struggle with. How did he kiss her? Answer is simple. They're cousins. He shows her affection, and Lavan brings him in. In verse 14, after Lavan is being told everything, Lavan says, "You are my bone and flesh, and you could just live with me." this I think here the Midrash is pretty correct. The Midrash says Lavan ran out to him, kissed and hugged him because he thought maybe he brings the same wealth and riches as the servant brought with him, but there's nothing. He says, okay, but you're my family, so sit with me. After a month, Lavan tells Yaakov, Hachi achi ata va'avadetani hinam. So here you see the translation of this is the old JPS. Because you are my brother, should you therefore serve me from nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? But that's not what Lavan tells Yaakov. He doesn't say, you are my brother. He says, you're not my brother. Are you my brother to work for nothing? Tell me, what should I pay you? Right, and that's a little surprising because we think of Lavan as a crook, right? As someone who is deceitful. So why is he offering Yaakov wages when Yaakov does not ask for it? The answer is that Lavan tells Yaakov, you are not part of the family. Originally he said, you are bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, right? But if Yaakov stays for too long and he works as a family member, that also makes him an heir, and he will inherit Lavan when Lavan dies. Lavan says, I'd rather pay you than make you a partner in my business. So Lavan, by paying Yaakov, makes him an employee rather than a partner. Because the way society was structured back then, all working hands of the family are working not for pay, but for the right to inherit the father. So now Lavan says, you cannot be part of that. I will pay you. So Mama Skultecha, Lavan has two daughters, Shema Gdula Leah v'Shema Ktana Rachel, and like I mentioned last time, I believe that they were identical twins, only that Leah, as it says here in verse 17, Anei Leah Rakot, she had weak eyes. It's very probable that she contracted some kind of a disease at an older age, and therefore she looked different, and if even in a way that really was very stressful to her, because people would see her and Rachel from afar, they're both beautiful, but when they come near, they look her in the eye and they don't feel so comfortable. So we have to think, really put ourselves in Leah's place, and think how desperate she was if she was willing to trick her sister, and her husband, her future husband, by pretending to be her sister. She knew that she's going to be really, Yaakov is not going to be happy with that, right? Yet she did it. So I want to share with you at this moment a beautiful poem written by I think it's Jonathan Geffen, who was the Tzvika Pik actually wrote that, an Israeli singer. And did he write it? 1 second. No, Ehud Manor. Ehud Manor was a very prolific Israeli songwriter, and here are the words. I read in Hebrew and translate. Just imagine what is happening, what is going through Eliaz's head. He says, את אותו הבוקר לא אשכח, כשטמנת ראשך בתוך הקר, אור השמש על האוהל נח, וראשי הלום שחר. He says, I will never forget this morning when you buried your head in the pillow. The sunlight was dancing on the tent, and I was still feeling the celebration of last night, the wine. And then he goes on to say, "Kshelaḥashti be'oznech et shema," and then I whispered her name into your ear. Et yadi asaft beyad kara, you took my hand with your cold hand. V'dim'a hat hama el kapot yaday nashra, and one boiling tear fell into my hands. So the poet here captured really the situation in Yaakov's tent. Can you imagine the day after the wedding when he wakes up and he finds out it's not Rachel? How upset he was. What would she say? And she never said, okay, you know what, my father cheated you, I wasn't part of it, he forced me, let's get divorced. No, she wanted him to be her husband. So that can explain the situation. But it's also the clear way of the Torah to say that what Yaakov did by taking the baracha from his father was not the right thing, because here he is punished right away in the same exact way that he deceived his father. He was one of twins who pretended to be his twin and took something that doesn't belong to him. And here Leah, who is a twin, takes him not in a correct manner. Now, the Torah also emphasizes that by changing the language. In verse 16, it says, Lavan shte banot, shema gedola Leah, v'shema ketana Rachel. The way the two daughters are referred to is gedola uktana. One is older, one is younger. But when Yaakov finds out that his wife is Leah and not Rachel, Lavan says, Lo ya'aseh bimkomenu. We don't do it here. Now Rashi comments on that. Here we don't do it. We're not like you. So he teases him. He rebukes him for what he did. We don't do what you did. What did you do? Latet hatza'ira lifnei bechira. To give the second-born before the firstborn. So in verse 16 it's gdola uktana, but in verse 26 tza'ira ubechira. Just like the names of Yaakov and Esav, Yaakov was the tza'ir, right? The prophecy said Verav Ya'avod Tza'ir, and Esav was the Bechor. So when Lavan says, I cannot do that, I cannot let you have the Tza'ira before the firstborn, he directly rebukes Yaakov for taking the right of the firstborn. So this is where we see that the Torah tells us that Yaakov started paying for what he did to Esav. So Yaakov works for 7 more years, and then, but he gets Rachel after 7 days. So within 7 days, he's married to 2 wives, and here we have to point out that the Torah is not in favor of bigamy. Anyone in the Torah or the Tanakh who practices bigamy or polygamy suffered. Maybe we mentioned it last time as well. Now Leah has, in this chapter, 4 sons: Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. And the interesting thing is that none of the first 3 sons became a leader. Shimon and Levi were actually almost excommunicated. But in the Baracha of Yaakov says they are aggressive, they are violent, I don't want to have any share with them. Levi becomes later on the spiritual leader, but not the political leader. Shimon completely disappears. Reuven tries to assume leadership several times, but always fails. He has actually 3 failures. One, when when Rachel passes away, Reuven sleeps with Bilhah in order to claim that he is the successor, and Yaakov gets very upset with that. The second time, Reuven tries to save Yosef by telling his brothers to throw him into the pit instead of killing him, but his plan fails. Instead of saving Yosef is being sold away, and they don't know where he is. The third time, Reuven tries to convince Yaakov to send Binyamin with him to Egypt, and Yaakov refuses. It's only Yehuda who manages to convince him. So really, we should ask the question: what was it in Yehuda that made him the leader and made him bypass the 3 older boys? So, any ideas? Any suggestions?
And you try to correct it later on?
Yeah, so you're right. No, so Yehuda later on shows this courage. He's willing to stand up and confess. Like the rabbi said, Yehuda is the one who gave Hodaya, is the one who confessed for his sins. But that is still the question: why did Yehuda have that strength and not other brothers? Where did he take it from? So I think that here we have a very important lesson that the Torah teaches us about the atmosphere that parents create in the household, even indirectly. there's a subliminal message that we transmit to our children. And, you would hear parents sitting with their children in the company of others, and the children would say something, and everybody would laugh, or everybody would be shocked, and the parents would say, I don't know where they got this from. But if you really pay attention, you see that they got it from the parents, but in a subliminal way. Yes, Shayna.
Well, I think he was the son of the favorite, so that gave him confidence also to be a leader.
Yeah, but Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are also the sons of the favorite. So how come he bypassed them?
That's true.
Yeah. So I think look what happens here. Look at the names that Leah gives her children. Reuven. Why does she call Reuven Reuven? Ki ra'a Adonai be'oni, ki ata ya'avani ishi. Hashem looked upon my affliction. Now my husband will love me. So when she looks at Reuven, she doesn't see Reuven as her son, per se, but rather as a tool to acquire Yaakov's love. She focuses on herself and her misery, which she was miserable. She did live a difficult life, but she says, I am so miserable, nobody loves me, but now I have Reuven, my husband will love me. Okay, she's pregnant again. Verse 33. She says, Ki shama Adonai kisnoa anochi. Hashem heard that I am hated, and He gave me another one. So it seems that what she did with Reuven, she hoped that Yaakov would love her because of her son. Didn't work out. And she feels that Yaakov hates her. So when Shimon is born, she says, oh, now my husband will stop hating me. Again, she looks at Shimon as a tool to redeem her from her misery. She gives birth again. She says, maybe now my husband will walk with me. She actually wants him to walk with her. She feels alone. Maybe they do walk together, but she doesn't feel that he's with her, right? And why would he walk with her now? Because she has 3 children, and they didn't have strollers where you could fit 3 children at the time, one at the lower level, one on the upper level, and one on the little, platform where they could stand. So if you have 3 children, you hold 2, and your husband would hold 1. So she says, literally, my husband will have to walk with me. So her focus on the 3 first children is on herself. I'm lonely, I'm miserable, I'm hated, maybe the children will change it. And she communicates this to the children. She doesn't communicate a sense of self-confidence and self-esteem. But then, when Yehuda is born, she says, Hapa'am odet Adonai. She says, this time I will praise Hashem. She sort of was able, maybe only for that moment, maybe later on with the other children it didn't happen, but she was able to get beyond that feeling of misery, that focus on the self, and say, you know what, I have to be happy. Hashem gave me that child. Let me praise Hashem for that. Ata apam odet Adonai. I'm not going to care whether my husband will be with me, whether he's going to be with Rachel. I am just happy that I have a child. And that is the sense that Yehuda got from her. He felt that he's the son of a woman who respects herself, who feels dignity in what she has, and she doesn't have to rely on him to get the love of Yaakov. So I think that is why Yehuda later on grew up to be the leader. And it could have been only for a very short period, but still it affected him. It shows us how important it is for us as parents to show confidence and self-esteem in ourselves and to convey it to our children, but to our children also to say, we believe in you, we praise you, we trust you. Never come down at children with strong rebuke that leaves them nowhere to go, or to not be appreciative of what they did and say, oh, that's not enough. You don't have to say that it's that halfway is enough, but to say what you did so far is beautiful and you could do more. So we see that from the way the Torah describes the names of the children of Leah, and we go to chapter 30. And here we see another very important lesson in communication. Here, Vater Rachel ki lo yaleda leYaakov. Rachel realized that she has no children. She became jealous, and she told Yaakov, "Give me children, or else I'll die." And Yaakov's anger was kindled against Rachel. He got very angry, and he says, "Am I God? God prevented you from having children." And she says, "No, I didn't mean that. If I want to have children, I could have it through a surrogate mother, Bilha, what was a common practice back then." What is happening here between Yaakov and Rachel? What happens is that Yaakov misunderstands Rachel. She comes to him asking for empathy. She already had a solution in mind. She didn't ask him for a solution. She just wanted him to empathize. Just want him to say, "I understand you, I feel you, I love you. What can I do? It's not in my hands, but I really understand how you feel." Instead, he says, "It's your problem." That's what she hears. God prevented you from having children, and she hears the emphasis on the you. God prevented you from having children. Rashi says that God prevented you from having. I have children. You don't have children. So she's now under attack. She feels that not only Yaakov does not understand her, he blames her for not having children because he has children from another wife. Why was Yaakov so upset? Yaakov loved Rachel dearly, but he sort of misunderstood her at that time. He thought that she's asking for a solution, and that's a common problem for men. We always look for a solution, and if we don't know the solution, we get frustrated. We try to hide the fact that we don't know the answer, and that's why we don't like to ask for directions. We don't want to be exposed as weak. So for Yaakov to be told, "Give me children," and he thinks, "How can I do that? I can never give her children." So he's frustrated and gets upset. So that is a classic example of miscommunication between spouses. The wife, Rachel, wants compassion, wants empathy. Yaakov thinks that she wants a solution, and there's friction. What happens as a result of that friction? We'll see soon. 1 second. Shayna, you have a question?
Well, it just sounds familiar with the story with Penina and Hannah as well.
Right. It's also with Penina and Hannah, not to the same extent as Yaakov, because Elkanah doesn't get upset. Elkanah tries to comfort Hannah, but it doesn't really speak to her. He says, "Why do you don't have to cry, you don't have to be sad, you have me, I'm better than 10 children. A woman doesn't want to hear the man saying, "You don't have to cry." The opposite. But the fact is that men are scared by seeing their wives, their spouse crying. "I don't know what to do. I have no solution for that. So stop crying. Don't worry. Everything will be okay." That's not always what people want to hear. They want to hear, "It's okay to cry. I understand why you're crying. Even let's cry together." I'm exaggerating, but to each situation its own. There's a beautiful midrash in the beginning of Echa Rabati, where the angel comes to Hashem, Metatron, like the Sarapnim, comes to God who's crying for the destruction of the temple, and says, "Why are you crying? You shouldn't cry. Let me cry for you." As if to say, and that's very similar to that situation where a husband says, "Don't worry, let me take the worry, let me take the concerns on my shoulders." And then God answers, "If you don't let me cry, I will go into hiding in a place where you cannot reach, and I'll cry there." And he quotes a pasuk, "Ve'im lo tishma'u b'mistarim tivke nafshi." Even if you cannot hear it, my soul cries in hiding. And that is also something that could happen to a couple, where the husband would say, "Don't cry, don't be concerned, don't be worried," and his wife would wear this mask and pretend not to worry, but really in hiding she will, and it will consume her, and it will not be healthy. Rashi comments here, based on the midrash, that Yaakov was punished for that. Rashi says, "Kach onim et hame'ukot." Is this a way to answer a woman in distress? And the punishment was, many, many years later, the brothers came and stood in front of Yosef and begged him to spare their lives. And Yosef answers with the same exact words, and he says, "Hatachat Elohim anochi." Am I God? I cannot punish you. The midrash sees a connection here says, because Yaakov misspoke with Rachel, that was the beginning of the sibling rivalry that later on brought the brothers to stand before Yosef the way they did. So, with those few pesukim, the names of the children of Leah, and the discussion between Rachel and Yaakov, the Torah teaches us really very deep educational lessons. May we be able to take them to heart, to communicate correctly with our children, with our spouses, with our friends, and as we read the parasha, share these lessons with others, and may we have a beautiful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom to all.